Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pal Stay at Home and Watch Movies. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, everyone.
And today we're going to be reviewing News of the World from 2020. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. A Civil War veteran agrees to deliver a girl taken by the Kiowa people years ago to her aunt and uncle against her will. They travel hundreds of miles and face grave dangers as they search for a place that either can call home. So my first pro of this movie is the young actress Helena Sego, who plays Johanna. Her acting skills in this movie mainly focus on her facial expression, and they really stood out for me since she has very little lines of dialogue in this movie, and she's also acting alongside Tom Hanks. But she really holds her own ground, which is amazing. So kudos to her acting in this movie, and congrats on her first English language debut film. Next, let's talk about Tom Hanks. He's great as Captain Kidd and how he slowly begins to accept his wife's passing and finds closure, which leads me to my next pro of the film, which is the genre. This movie has an old Western feel to it, but doesn't have the bones of one. What I mean by this is, to me, an old Western is rugged about a gunslinging loner who is set on his own path, but he needs to get in fights with bad guys, and some bad guys eventually go down in the film, and at the end, the protagonist rides off into the sunset. Well, this film has the costume, the set, and even the cinematography of a Western, but not the story. Its story is a simple one to follow. Two main characters are searching for their home, and at the end, they realize that their home is with each other. Tom Hanks needs to accept his wife's death and let her go in order to really live his life with a new home or purpose. So Helena's character is this path of grief, acceptance, and forgiveness, which Tom Hanks has to go through, and he does it by following her as she relives these themes on her own journey. Now let's move on to my cons. Even though the story is about finding a new home for the two main characters, it's a rather simple one, and we don't see much development of Captain Kidd's character. Well, not much of a backstory. We just see him change his mind, and that's pretty much it. Now that I think about it, I think it would have been a nice touch if Johanna was actually returned to the Kiowa, but either they turned her away for some reason, or she ran away to find Captain Kidd. Yes, I know that this kind of sort of happened in the film, that he returned her to her aunt and uncle, but instead of her running to Captain Kidd, it was Captain Kidd who came back for her. So I would have liked it if it was the other way around, that the girl came back for him, and that would have been a more touching feel for this movie, because that's the route I saw this movie being. It was a nice, lighthearted movie. My next point and my final point is the length of the movie. It was almost 2 hours long. First, we could have made it shorter. They could have had omitted some characters that really didn't need to be added in the story. Like, for example, we have John Callie, who is the guy who joins them in the wagon, and then they split off. So this is the part where we actually get a little backstory to Captain Kidd, what he used to do before. He used to print papers before the war. That's a little backstory that they could have added pretty quickly in other situations and not added this character along. Also, we have Miss Gannett from the hotel who sleeps with Captain Kidd. I mean, you could cut her role a little shorter. She just needed to be basically like the lady who talked to the girl in the dialect, and that's it. We didn't need anything else. Plus, what she added was the idea that he has to return to his wife. We could have gotten this through any part of the movie with a quick flashback or somebody just mentioning his wife on passing. He had a lot of friends that he bumped into and towns that he's been to. So there's some characters that either didn't have to have their stories a little long. They could have just been really shortened. And by this, they could have reduced the movie to an hour and a half pretty easily. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend Touly. But right before, I'm going to ask a quick question. Did you notice who played Mr. Brandholm? If you remember, he was Captain Kidd's old friend who told him about his wife's death. Can you place him in something you actually watched recently?
To answer your question, and I guess it might relate to one of my critiques as well, is no, I didn't recognize this person. And maybe the reason is I found the characters in this film to be not very memorable. Like, their impression on me, none of them really stood out. Maybe because I was thinking that way, and the movie having been already that long, that maybe at that point I sort of lost focus. Like, I wasn't as in tune as I would be, trying to pay attention to like the finer details about the film. So yeah, to answer your question, I didn't recognize that person, but maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. Yeah, what did did I like about the movie? Let's see here. The story, it's simple, easy to follow. So I would say I'll give that a plus because, sometimes films tend to overcomplicate stuff for just the sake of it trying to be different or trying to be thought-provoking or just trying to do too much and get away from the main message that the movie's trying to deliver. So yeah, I pretty much saw this film as, two individuals who comes from two different backgrounds and who are trying to overcome their history, their personal demons, as Tom Hanks' character said at one point in the movie, and continue traveling in that line metaphor that he told Johanna. So yeah, pretty simple, nothing, like I said, too thought-provoking, which is alright, but at the same time, certain scenes that I feel could have been either executed with more emotion or with more passion so that I could actually believe that the relationship between Tom Hanks' character and Helena Zangel's characters, I feel like their relationship was developing over time and in a believable fashion. And I guess this is also a con to the film as well, but the movie to me sort of feels like it started, like if I were to compare this to like a book, like it felt like it started on chapter 2. At the beginning of the film, we see Tom Hanks' character and we see him in his room, and then he does his news reading, and then he's back in his room, and then suddenly he's on the road, and then he come across this dead body and then discovers Johanna. For me, I would have liked it if they spent a little more time introducing us to Tom Hanks' character, have him talk to somebody, and through that conversation we sort of find out who he is, maybe his past a little bit, where he's from. Is these setups, it's this thing that they build us up to the main character, our protagonist, so that we could get on board with him. It's as if you were to hear a narrator say, this is the tale of such and such, but of course done in this non-narrative sort of setting, right, where we just see Tom Hanks' character go through the town he's currently at and maybe interacting with somebody he already knows from the town, and then we see him leave the town and then come across Johanna. But when Captain Kidd met Johanna for the first time, I actually looked at the timeline of the film, like how far long has the movie been for, and I don't think it was even like over 10 minutes yet at that point. So I felt like that introduction was really, really rushed, and it sort of in a way painted a picture of what was to come in terms of the development of these two characters in relationship to one another. I mean, definitely, I think they were going for this father and daughter sort of feel, but I felt like there wasn't enough struggle between their relationship at the beginning for me to sort of buy into the believability of it. I feel like Johanna should have resisted a whole lot more because, hey, this is this stranger who is pretty much taking captive of me, and for some reason I have to follow this guy around. I wasn't buying into this state of calmness between the two characters. I just wanted more resistance from Johanna, and also from Tom Hanks' character. I wanted him to show more frustration because I think at one point in the film he said that he wasn't familiar or comfortable with raising a kid or something like that. I wanted him to struggle as well, but it felt like they immediately got to the meat of that problem in terms of like building those two characters' relationship by having them deal with those three bandits. And after that, Johanna started warming up to him. I would have liked that to happen later in the film as they were building up to that moment while they were encountering the struggles of being around one another. I would have liked that more of that bandit scene happen later. So because of that, I felt like some of the antagonists of the film, their role was diminished because of where their presence was felt in the film. I guess to sort of backtrack on a character that Sal brought up to Doris, it was the translator who they met in town where Captain Kidd asked for, a couple of rooms for the night. I found it weird that her character decided to spend the night with Captain Kidd, realizing that Captain Kidd was still struggling with his demon, and that is his wife. If he was really struggling with his personal situation, I would have felt like he would have like denied her to spend the night. That to me just felt weird. And I suppose like as we experience the sort of stuff that led to the ending of the film, where Tom Hanks' character leaves Johanna with her relative and he goes into San Antonio to see to his wife's grave, take off his ring, and then go back to get the kid. I did not really like that. I didn't like how they handled that sequence. Either San Antonio or wherever location the wife was told to be at should have already happened already, like maybe like midway through the film, so that you could see not only how Captain Kidd would react to the situation, but how Johanna would react to Captain Kidd reacting to his wife, so that she, even though maybe at that point in time, even though they still have this language barrier between them, that just through the notion of like facial expression or the human heart, that she realizes that this is somebody important to him. And maybe that's a mechanism for her to sort of either warm up to Captain Kidd or be a little less of like a frustration to him. him, like listen to him a bit more, even if like you don't completely understand him. Like make her do stuff that in Captain Kidd's eyes be civilized and sort of please him. There was that scene where she was eating with her hands and he told her, we use a spoon, a little effort or something. I don't know. But I would have liked that scene with Captain Kidd interacting at the cemetery at which his wife was buried at. I would have liked that scene to happen earlier, not at the end, because it felt like the movie at that point was divided. Like, okay, Captain Kidd has brought Johanna back home to her home, quote unquote, and now this is his time to deal with his demon, which is his wife, and now he has to go to San Antonio. And then it's only after that that he realizes that, oh, I have nobody else. I need to go back and get this kid. And it just so happens to turn out that the kid isn't happy where she's at too. I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I don't think anybody was surprised. And her relatives, they weren't pleased with her being around as well because they had her tied down because she kept on running away. I would have liked these things to have transpired more naturally. And what would have helped too, again, is like the sort of emotions that would have been expressed during these scenes. Like, again, I would have expected Johanna to react more strongly when Captain Kidd left her with her relatives. Like, after everything that they've gone through, definitely the bond between these two characters should have been strong to the point of it being very difficult for these two to be separated. But how Johanna just was staring out the window right before Captain Kidd left, I was thinking to myself, she needs to like cry or attempt to run away at that point in front of him so that he knows that he's hurting her. But that's sort of the way they went about handling it, and how Captain Kidd sort of explained it was, oh, maybe she just doesn't understand what's happening right now. You can only get so far by saying stuff like that because you've already sort of established that as like an excuse from when you met her with the language barrier and the culture difference because of where she was raised. But at the end of the film, I couldn't buy that as a reason anymore because these two characters' relationship should have developed to a point where they're family. And knowing the loss of family from both of their sides, they should value how much they mean to one another now. This is what I mean by the characters not having the sort of impact that I thought they should have had if they were to have executed these scenes with the sort of emotion that I found would to be more believable. And because of this, it affected all of the characters that were a part of the journey, from the protagonist to the side characters to the antagonists. So I felt like overall it was like a wasted opportunity to enhance the experience. Yes, the story is still simple, and again, I think that's my biggest pro to the film, but at no point of the film I thought that I was on this high, that it was building up to something grand. Like, it was just very steady. It didn't dip either, so maybe that's also a pro. It's a pretty steady film throughout, but to me it never really built up to a point where I felt very attached to a particular scene or any character. So my overall score for the film in the end is going to be a 5 out of 10. One more last thing too, I know I just gave my score to the film, but I know it's a comparison to a video game, but what I was sort of after in terms of feel of the film, how like characters development or how building these relationships between characters, what I sort of wanted, I would say, is I would compare it to the video game The Last of Us. There were two characters in there who resembles this sort of father and daughter relationship. Again, I don't want a one-to-one makeover. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for like how these characters develop, the feel of it. I think The Last of Us would be a great example in my book to sort of have these characters develop around one another.
Okay, so back to my question. Bill Camp, who plays Captain Kidd's friend from childhood, who tells him about his wife, he's also in Queen's Gambit. He's Mr. Scheibel, because I know you watched it. So in that movie, he stood out more than this movie, and I agree with you. There's some characters who don't really stand out, but here's my way I would have fixed the movie. First of all, I would have made Captain Kidd have an alcohol problem. During the day, he drinks. At night, he reads the newspaper, and that's the way he gets money for his alcohol problem, because he can't accept that his wife is dead. And also, he can't go to her grave to say goodbye. And that basically drives him to alcohol. Then Doris is a prostitute who he just stumbles upon to go stay with her, and that could fit why she slept with him. But at the same time, she would have pushed him to deliver the girl, because he would have been opposed to deliver the girl and said, it's just a bother, but they're forcing me to keep her with me. I don't know what to do. Doris will basically push them and say, hey, take her to her home and accept your wife is dead. And in that way, not directly telling him, but indirectly by doing that on the journey, he would have accepted that his wife has passed away. away, and the bandit scene. Maybe let the bandits kidnap the girl and Captain Kidd give up his alcohol problem and say, hey, I'm going to go after her and save her. After he saves her, they kind of gain a bond, like you said. Make him win her affection over some little trials and not have these characters just pop in and out and just disappear. And then after he saves her, maybe they do end up in San Antonio and he takes her to the grave, like you said, and there she sees how he feels hurt, not by words, but just emotionally and facial expressions. And they can connect that way. And then she also feels the same way when she visited the house where her parents died. And that way they both kind of accept each other's pain. And then, yes, you go to the aunt and uncle. They reject her and say they can't take care of her. And Captain Kidd says, you know what, kid? You don't need them. Your home is with me and my home is with you. And they go back to San Antonio and go to the grave. And finally, he tells his wife, I accepted your passing away. And here's the thing. I'm going to live my life. This is my new life. This is my friend. We're going to stay together and we're going to support each other. And then he does triumph over his alcohol problem. And we see the last scene when together they're delivering the news town to town. So for me, that would have been a more cohesive story instead of this going from one thing to another with no backstory, no nothing. And it would have made it more sense and we could have seen the characters develop a little more. So my grade for this movie is going to be a 5.5 out of 10. It's simple, easy to follow, but I needed a little more than just what I had. So I guess that does it for this review of News of the World. Please join us next time where we're going to review Greenland.
Hello?
This is a presidential alert. It is not a test.
John, Alan, Garrity,
You've been selected for emergency shelter relocation with
Allison, Rose, Garrity, Nathan, Beckett, Garrity.
You are allowed one personal bag. There are no exceptions.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.